here with you today. I work with emerging technologies to build immersive experiences. So I've done that for these companies and more. And previously I worked, what is that? Oh no, my videos went away. Oh, there we go, thanks. That was a sneak peek of my dog. So previously I worked for a company called Meow Wolf, which is backed by the Game of Thrones guy, George R.R. Martin. And what that is a physical, in-person, immersive installation that tells a story. And what it looks like is a regular house, but throughout the house, there are portals to alternative dimensions, which are 360, fully immersive, hands-on artwork. So this is real. This is not a video game. This is a portal through a refrigerator. And I also worked on the exhibition Omega Mart in Las Vegas, which is a very strange immersive supermarket where you can find deeply weird products like these and explore corporate offices of an interdimensional mega corporation. And you can purchase products like influence in a bottle and wake up please and tattoo chicken. And of course, now I work at Media Molecule on a product called Dreams. And Dreams is the creative ecosystem for the PlayStation. It's a full suite for playing and creating games, animation, music, and anything else you can dream of. And this is a little clip of our art director, Kareem, using the PlayStation Move controllers to create Live in Dreams. But as you can see, it is a different kind of interface in which you can use the PlayStation controller to the moves to create experiences and sculpt in a pretty intuitive way. And if you're familiar with game development tools like Unreal or Unity, this might look a little different to you because it is a visual programming language. So here's a little overview of what I'm going to talk about today. WTF is a metaverse. I'm assuming that's why you're all here. And my second point is there's always been a metaverse, also the title of this talk. And the third and final part is designing for the metaverse. So what are some practical tips and tricks that you can take home with you today for how to design metaverses that people want to come back to? Okay, so WTF is a metaverse. What does the word metaverse even mean? We hear and see it everywhere, whether or not we're talking about digital twins, NFTs, massive multiplayer game spaces. My favorite is Coca-Cola Bite, which is the first and probably only soda that's was released first in the metaverse before anywhere else. Apparently it's pretty sweet. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going over a few different definitions of the metaverse, how other people conceptualize it, and then I'm going to present to you a synthesis of that. So according to Matthew Ball, who's sometimes referred to as Mr. Metaverse, the metaverse is a persistent and interconnected network of 3D visual worlds that will eventually serve as the gateway to most online experiences and also underpin much of the physical world. So here we have this kind of unidirectional channel that eventually we're going to have the virtual space dictate what physical space and experience is and becomes. And the Institution of Engineering and Technology, a UK-based think tank and technology policy agency, defines metaverse as a term describing an embodied internet, one that no longer relies on a representation on a flat screen, but which simulates direct experience. So for those of you who have seen Minority Report, we're thinking more far away from flat screens like monitors, perhaps even our phones, and moving forward into different types of interfaces that might feel a little bit more immersive. And Kathy Hackle describes the term typically as used to describe the concept of a future iteration of the internet made up of persistent, shared 3D virtual spaces linked into a perceived virtual universe. So we have a digital space that everyone is connected to. So what does this mean? I went through and I highlighted all of the relevant phrases or the commonalities between all of those definitions. And what it seems like is The metaverse is a perspective, and it's a perspective rooted in a desire for technology to facilitate basic human needs. So it's not a technology, but a perspective. But what are those human needs? I've identified some design principles you can see in different types of metaverses. And one of those is the importance of connecting to other human beings, the opportunity to be part of something larger than themselves, which includes persistence, the world of the game continuing 24/7, desire for and attaining social status, the opportunity to live fantasies by taking on other identities or behaviors that are either impossible or clash with the rules of polite society, either implicitly or explicitly, and the ability to connect to or become relatable or aspirational characters. So why now? Why is everyone talking about the metaverse now? Well, we've seen representations of the metaverse in fiction. So here are just a few. But if you look at all of those examples, there are a few commonalities that we might find troubling. So one of those themes is social and economic collapse, economic disparity carrying into the virtual world, environmental disaster, AI computation controlling everything, metaverse acts as an escape from the physical world, menial labor in digital space becoming a primary form of income, pervasive feelings of lack of control and loss of agency, and real life and simulations becoming indistinguishable from each other. Yes, you might have noticed my good friend, the flesh pod from Existence up there. So, okay, do any of these things sound familiar? Well, this shouldn't be a surprise to you. Especially based on like the shared experience of all of us in the room, should be no surprise that the climate disaster is here. Many of us have been feelings of social isolation and disconnection from others after being in isolation related to the coronavirus for the past several years. And the income disparity between the wealthiest and the poorest people in the world is the widest it's ever been. And yet, while this may sound really spooky, and it is, this isn't the first time humanity has looked to big story worlds in times of crisis. So that brings me to the second part of this talk. There's always been a metaverse. So let's rewind a few epochs. Let's go back in time. Immersive storytelling, kind of mentioned this idea of immersion as something key to the metaverse. It's almost as ancient as humanity itself. So when we talk about the metaverse, one of the things that we talk a lot about is immersion, and that's the idea that players can feel as if they've been transported to another world. Now, we talk about technology as the only way to do this now, but actually humanity has been using different methods for transporting us to alternate universes for literally thousands of years. Take, for example, the cave paintings of Lascaux. We have early human civilization. The world is very scary. We don't have things like modern medicine or agriculture or other things that meet our other basic human needs like food, shelter, etc. And in nomadic societies, the storyteller played a much more prominent role in creating social cohesion as these nomadic societies move from place to place. So if we think about a cave painting, it's not just about this 2D image that's painted on the cave. It's the experience of being inside the cave with your family or the people who are close to you in your community. It's the feeling of seeing this lit by a fire, being gathered around that fire, and also the acoustic component of hearing the sound radiating within the cave. So that very much is an immersive experience that predates electronic technology. And of course, another great example is Greco-Roman mythology. As we know, Greco-Roman mythology is full of powerful, capricious, and horny gods whose behaviors show us that the world isn't always fair, and it doesn't make sense, and that it can be perilous and wild. And in mythology, we have a broad cast of complex characters who appear and reappear in immersive story worlds forming alliances and nemesis, and we pick our favorite characters who we can identify with and root for. And so again, when we refer to metaverses as immersive story worlds, we might think of immersiveness as something very new. But if we look back at things like troubadours or Shakespeare or opera, it's not just about the particular vehicle, the technology of telling the story itself. It's about this kind of multi-dimensional, multidisciplinary process of creating a world that fulfills those social needs of social cohesion, of belonging, of learning where you come from and who you are. So it's not just immersive storytelling. That's a really important part of what metaverses are and what they can be. Games and play are also very ancient human pastimes as well. And this probably isn't a surprise to a lot of you. Playing games are also ancient methods for connecting with others and making sense of the world. So some of you might be familiar with the Mesoamerican ball game, perhaps. And this dates back to at least 1650 BC. Hydrate. And this was not only played for recreation, but also religious ritual and a tool for resolving conflict. So in which the outcomes of the game would have real world implications that would carry out from the magic circle of the game and into the real world. Another example, we're in the UK, so this one might be a little bit more familiar. Another example of how games and play have been used to make sense of the world is the seemingly innocuous playground game Ring Around the Rosie, in which children gather together in a circle to sing the song, "Ring around the roses, a pocket full of posies." This song is actually about the bubonic plague and the rashes that form around the sores of the infected, that's the ring around the rosy, and the preparation of the bodies for cremation. Ashes, ashes, we all fall down. Ooh. And so while many think about games and play as something innocent and pure, and this is an example of aspects of the world we live in always creep into the games we design and the systems people build. And of course, a very obvious, perhaps too on the nose example is Monopoly, which is a simulation of how banks, prisons, and the real estate market work together. Three pervasive real world phenomena that we choose to replicate and play with in our free time. Many of these games over and over, we might experience playing these with our family or as a child, and we become deeply familiar with the logics of these games, often from a very young age. And of course, humans aren't the only species who play. Here's my dog doing an example of something called a play bow. So that's like if you ever see a dog go like this, that's an invitation to play. And despite the fact that she's 4 times the size of this other dog, she's demonstrating that she's not a threat and that she's much submissive. She's very submissive to this other dog. So she's using play to communicate real world information that has major implications on their safety. But a point that I really want to hammer home is the ways we play shape our understandings of the world, and the world shapes the ways we play. Game and system designers build the world we live in. And that's not to say that every game needs to be a brutal epic about the global crises faced by humanity, but it does mean that designers have power and influence to design alternatives to the worlds we live in now. And escapism can play a role in that. Games and storytelling can provide us with rest, a respite from the exhausting, powerless, and terrifying worlds we live in. There's a quote about this from Neil Gaiman that I really like, and he says, "I think that pretty much every form of fiction can actually be a real escape from places where you feel bad and from bad places. It can be a safe place you go, like going on holiday, and it can be somewhere that, while you've escaped, actually teaches you the things you need to know, and when you go back, that gives you knowledge and armor and tools to change the bad place you were in." So no, they're not escapist, they're escape. And I like that a lot. Okay, so Now we're in part 3. Now that we know what we know, the metaverse is a new way of thinking about meeting our core human desires. Hydrate again. All kinds of cultural forms and games have tried to do the same thing over the course of thousands and thousands of years. But that's not going to stop anyone from talking about the metaverse. And it's not going to make anyone think it's less powerful or less persuasive. So we have several metaverses already, whether we like it or not. So what are we going to do about that? So here are some very, very practical tips. First and foremost, resist the hype. And so some of you might have seen this before. If you've seen me speak before, you've probably definitely seen this graph. This is called the Gartner hype cycle, and I love it very much. Now, what it does is it measures or communicates the difference between expectations around a particular technology and what can I actually deliver. So when you have the new technology just show up, everyone is really, really excited about what it can do. That's the peak of inflated expectations. And here comes my favorite part. After people start to realize what that technology can't do yet, trough of disillusionment. So I'm sure many of you can think about technologies you've seen go through this hype cycle. And of course, over time, as technologies become less sexy and more functional, we start to even this out over time. Yeah, that's a Gartner hype cycle. So we're having this moment where we're seeing the term metaverse used a lot. than other parts of the forest. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our connected root systems to move resources across the forest. So of course, this term comes from ecosystem science, the symbiotic relationship between plants and forests, and the methods of communicating and distributing resources through root systems. And this is a term that I coined to describe a more sustainable, growth-oriented ecosystem of players and content creators. Now, this methodology foregrounds the human needs and desires associated with the core metaversal values that I mentioned earlier, and while meaningfully integrating and acknowledging the existence of the real physical world, because we need that. And so mycorrhizic design does not attempt to simulate or replace the real world. It is a playful lens for envisioning a new reality. Now, the TLDR for this, because I get really excited, is a metaverse that doesn't replace reality, but is in playful conversation with it. What does this look like in practice? I have a couple examples, but there's a lot more I think that could be done here. One, equitable monetization and rev share models, paths into the games and entertainment industries that might not have previously existed, supporting real world equity and sustainability, moderation that works, and meaningfully yes ands community. What do I mean by yes ands? That's a term I'm borrowing from improv comedy, which is the idea of you say something, and rather than negate that thing, you say yes and you build on that to create something fun and interesting and new and improvisational. So I have a couple examples of projects we've already done at MM that could serve as early R&D for these types of principles. And for the first one, I'm going to show you a quick video. So, yeah. Okay. So Mega Penguin Rehatched is a really good example of what I was talking about earlier with the nonlinear storytelling and this idea of yes anding with community. And it is a collaborative storytelling and game design project where my wonderful, wonderful, brilliant colleagues at MM created the first 3 chapters of the chronicles of a very buff penguin from outer space. And they deliberately left the game unfinished, which gave the players opportunities to design and submit subsequent levels and choose Mega Penguin's fate. And MM provided the community with a collection of assets that anyone could use to build up those levels. And it's a delightful project. Another example I'd love to talk about is the Impies, which is the yearly award show in Dreams. And it is a award show that acknowledges and celebrates the community and their creativity. And different components of the event are streamed, some are in-game, and all of the content, the designs, the aesthetics, are created in response to the community's content and what they've designed and their games. So this is very much an example of what symbiosis, again, that idea of yes-anding, looks like in design. And it's just gorgeous. And we have Dreams coming up soon, so that's another great example of how we do that. And the final example I'll give is this project we recently did in collaboration with the UN's Play for the Planet initiative, which was a game jam focused on sustainable farming. And we created a partnership with the Arbor Day Foundation in which we planted 100 trees for every game submitted to the jam. What I really liked about this project is that aside from the fact that it's gorgeous, is that participants in the jam had the option to create something educational or scientific or something wildly creative and imaginative and playful. But what I really appreciated was the opportunity to create meaning and impact in the physical world and to tie that to digital creativity. Those things don't have to live in isolation from each other. So I am at the end of my talk, but I'll quickly recap the most important bits I'd like for you to take away today. This will probably be, if you don't listen to anything in the talk, this is probably the one slide where you could be like, I want to develop and I learned a thing. So the first point is I want to mention is the metaverse is a perspective, not any one particular type of technology, focused on how technology can be used to meet basic human needs. These needs are not new. They are pervasive. They are historic. There are many precedents for how games and storytelling have been used to connect humans to each other, digital and non-digital precedents, by creating persistent and overlapping worlds that embody the ethos or ethoses of their heroes and anti-heroes. Number 3, games and technology matter. They matter, they matter, they matter. They're extremely important. And designers have an obligation to consider the kinds of worlds they build, the kinds of futures we live in, because they're real. And we have a metaverse, and we can have a metaverse that complements the physical world, and I believe this is of dire importance. So in closing, I will say to you, designers, developers, and creatives, as you all imagine the metaverse, there's an opportunity to build a world we actually want to live and thrive in, a just and verdant digital ecosystem where we can connect, play, and dream. So with that, I'll say to you, good luck and have fun. Thank you. I'll be around until Thursday, so feel free to catch me if you have any questions. Thank you so much for sticking through that. Have a lovely rest of your conference.